Hello, it's Dr. Bob Rowe again, and we're going to talk a little bit about healing at a distance. This comes from many different sources because there's many different ways of doing it. What I've done is looked at a number of different ways of doing it and put together a very, very simple approach to it that anyone can use, and makes it very, very simple based on other systems that have already proven it. So let's go into talking about what everything is first. And everything we know is energy. When you break everything down to the smallest parts, it's these little particles that come and go, and they're just pure energy. So everything is energy, and there's this huge space in between energy. So we'll just accept that everything is energy. The other thing is we have to know is that everything is connected. In other words, when everything happened, even in the Big Bang Theory, everything started from one point and spread out. So we are connected, and we are part of everything that is. Now, there's a number of different terms for this. The morphic field, or morphogenic field, as Rupert Sheldrake would call it. It's a field with all information, holds all information and all accumulated knowledge. So, and we know to a degree that that definitely does exist, but I think it's even bigger than that. My training as a chiropractor talked about universal intelligence. In other words, the thing that holds the universe together, the glue or the intelligence that holds everything together. And there's many names for it. We could go on and on and on about the names, but let's just say that there is this energy that holds everything together in a cohesive manner. And not a big surprise if there was only one source, and we're all here. We all must be part of that source. So we all came from the same source. Being from that source, everything is connected, and it's called, in some cases, it's called quantum entanglement if we agree to be connected to others. And I'm not going to go into any great depth on that, but we are fairly complex beings, and that we exist on many, many levels, and that we have all these connections through these many, many, many levels, possibly many universes, many dimensions, all of those kinds of things. Just for lack of another word, we could call it part of the matrix. There's a matrix of energy and connections for everything that there is, and we're all part of it. So knowing that, then we exist on all levels at once. And so if we're all connected, all information should be able to be accessed by all. When we talked about the brain, we found out that everything is just very, very simple. The way your brain works, the way the universe works. Behind the scenes is very complicated, but accessing how your brain works, the programming is really, really simple. There's just two things. You can have a look at that video. But what we know is that information is open to everybody, and remote viewing, again, I'm not going to go into great depth on that one, but that is the one where you're given a target in an envelope and a random number, and you're supposed to identify what that represents. And there's ways of going through that. But that's called remote viewing. And it's been used on many, many levels, scientifically proven. A lot of study. The military uses it. Especially all of the major countries use the remote viewing to spy on each other. Because once you understand that you can access information and you don't have to have any special abilities, then everything is open to you. And if we can learn that everything is open to us, then we are actually understand that everything must be connected, and we have an influence on all kinds of things. So in remote viewing, like I said, they just give you an envelope, and the person that is giving you the target will just come up with a random number to represent what that target is. So there's no reference to where it is, whether it's an animal, mineral, a human, a place, whatever it is. It's just a random number. And then they go through a process of using what they call ideograms to come up with ideas of what that represents and getting the brain out of the way. In other words, our subjective brain trying to make a decision on it. That's the biggest part of doing the remote viewing, is trying to get your brain out of the way, because it just wants to come in there and make a decision for you based on all your beliefs, when the most important thing is just to connect into source, or the morphic field, or whatever you want to call it, and bring that information through. And in the human family, for many thousands of years, especially since the beginning, we've used symbols and symbols to represent things. So it's not something that's new. It's part of us as human beings. Simple drawings are symbols. It's not the exact same thing, but it's a symbol. So let's look at a few healing methods, and let's break them down and see if we can take something from all of them and then utilize it for doing some remote healing. So the first one we're going to look at is radionics. Radionics is fairly simple. So what you do is you take a person that has a problem, and you identify that person using a thing called a witness, and then you use a pendulum to indicate where the problems are in that person's body and all of those different things. And then once you understand where the problems are, you then use your pendulum to dose a number that represents the energy needed to correct that particular problem. And by doing that and then setting a machine in motion, you start to heal it. So let's go through an example. You're contacted to use radionics to help a client. So you need something to represent the client. You take a drop of blood, a piece of hair, their signature, whatever, so that you're representing the person. Then what you do is you take and you dose what area of their body is a problem. And once you have those problems, understand what those problems are, then you go to determining what the rate is. And a rate is a number to represent something that will correct that discrepancy in the healing force, or that part of force in the body that isn't working well. And so there's a number of different machines, but and they seem quite complex, is they can ask for all kinds of rates and numbers for all kinds of different things. And if you start reading a lot of books on radionics, what they keep saying is that the machines are not that important. It is the person operating the machines that are so important, because they have the biggest influence on it. And I won't go into huge details on that, but you can see that in most of the books that are out there. So in all of these books, they're looking to find what the problem is of the person, then detecting what numbers for the rates for the healing energy to be sent to that person so that the person gets healed. So you dial in the rates on that machine and you set it in motion, and that is supposed to broadcast that energy out to that person to heal them, which is really great. So what do we know about radionics? Kind of simple. Radionics is a very successful healing system. It gets really good results. 75 to 80% of the people get results from it. It uses a number to represent the healing energy, and it uses a witness to represent the client. And so those are the simple facts of radionics. I won't get into any more detail because we really don't need to know all of that for what we're going to do. So let's talk about remote viewing. How do they do things? Well, they use a random number to represent the target. Interesting. So maybe you don't need a specific piece of material from that target. Maybe you can just use a random number, and maybe Source knows, the universe knows what you mean by that, and it will send you information about that target if you're asking for it. So the universe, when you're asking for it in remote viewing, you will get indications of certain things related to it, and you draw these little idioms so your brain gets out of the way, the subjective brain gets out of the way to make any decisions. And then once you compile enough of them, you'll have an indication of what it is, and then you can come to a conclusion. So, and the field wants to work with you, or source, or whatever you want to call it. So let's talk about another healing method called theta healing. So theta healing is really interesting, and I'm not a theta healing expert. I just know that what you do is you go into a brain state called theta, which allows you to go up and contact source immediately. So for all of the healing systems that are out there, it's always a human interpretation of what it is. And that always leaves some things lacking, because we can't know everything there is about what's going on in all the multi-dimensions and the universe and all of those things. It's just not possible to know all those things from where we are in this three-dimensional world, because we only have certain senses that only sense certain things within this realm that we're living in right now. So what happens is that we have to ask some questions. Number one, do we really need a witness if we're going to represent a certain person that we want to help? And obviously from remote viewing, we can just use a random number. We don't need any witness. And I think that's important because it doesn't limit the universe. In other words, if we use a physical witness, then I think that represents the physical part of the person. We know that all of us exist on many, many different dimensions, and it could be any one of those that is out of balance that is causing our problems where we exist here today. So what we want to do is not get too specific and not get in the way of source, so that source can look at everything that is needed. So we can just ask source to give us the numbers representing the frequencies that will optimize that person. So it balance those different areas of the person in the different dimensions. It might be just physically in them right now. It might be their consciousness, their mission that they have for this lifetime. Who knows what they are? There's so many possibilities that as a human being living in a three-dimensional world, we just can't access all of the possibilities of what there is. However, going back to the beginning, source was all there was. We're part of it. We exist in all dimensions because source exists on all dimensions, and we're part of source. So we can ask source to give us the information we want. And so the trick is to be specific enough to get the info for whatever the healing is. And maybe it's not healing. Maybe it's balancing the imbalances on whatever dimension or whatever level exists that gives us back our ability to function better on this level and to accomplish whatever our mission is. So if we have symptoms or problems, to actually help with getting rid of those so we can continue on our journey here to be optimal in what we need to do in this plane, in this 3D world. So what we can do is, instead of dosing individual rates for what we think is wrong with individual parts of the body, we can just ask source to give us a number representing whatever that imbalance is, and that number will represent what the balance is needed to bring that person back to their optimal state so that their symptoms will go away, or that they will be able to function on many different levels. And that's basically how simple it is. So just as in theta healing, we go to source. And again, why do we do that? It's fairly simple. Just because of the fact there are so many dimensions. We can't know everything there is from where we are right here. So there could be imbalances on the many different levels of energetic levels that we exist. And our senses, again, are limited to what this 3D world can allow us to see. So it could be something else. It could be on a different level. It could be in a different universe. It could be something that's influencing us from there. So we're just asking source to give us a number that represents the balancing that will go on to bring us back in an optimal state so that we can function in this 3D world. And that's basically the concept behind all of this. Because, again, Source knows everything, because all information is, and even like Tom Campbell in his My Big Toe theory of everything, he keeps talking about the data. So the data is information. So it's all about information. So all of the information we need exists somewhere in Source, because Source is everything. And Source exists on all levels, just as we do. And since we're part of Source, then all we have to do is ask Source to look to those levels that we exist on that are out of balance and give us a number that represents that balancing frequency that will bring us back into balance on whatever level we need it. So it's very, very simple. So let's look at a representation of how it would look. So, and again, we have to ask if this healing is, or this balancing is, optimal for this person at this time. So what you do is you use a random number, in this case 563, that represents the target or the person. Instead of a witness, we're just using a random number like we do in remote viewing. And then we go to Source. We ask for that part of us that exists on that level of Source that can access all of these frequencies that we need, all these balancing optimal frequencies that we need, or that energy, or whatever we want to call it. And that can be the healing rates. So we go to Source, and you can use whatever method you want to come up with that number. You can say the Source is how many numbers are involved, and does each number have 1 digit, 2 digits, 3 digits, or more? And you can use your pendulum to ask all those. And then you can come up with numbers. And then in the end, when you think you have all the numbers, you can then ask Source, are these all the numbers? And are these most optimal for this person at this time? And then all you have to do is ask Source or command Source to provide these frequencies, these balancing frequencies, for the optimal time needed to bring this person back up to its optimal level so that they can function here on this plane at their optimal level, as long as it's good for everyone involved. Because sometimes we go through trials and tribulations because we have to learn something. And if we go out of them too soon, we might not learn what we need to learn. So we have to ask, will this work for what this person needs right now? And will it influence them in the proper way, and all of those involved, so that they will get the optimal benefit from it? And that's all you have to ask. And then you just command it to start and let it take over. And that's all you have to do. So first of all, you have to remember that you have to get the person's permission that you're doing this with. Ask them if it's okay if you do this remote healing, and allow them to say yes to you or no. And if they say no, then don't do it. You can't interfere with somebody unless they ask you for help or they're willing to accept your help. So those are the real keys that you need to think about. So anyways, so what I would say is that you might want to just practice this a bit. Take a look and put this together in a way that really works for you. And over time, you'll be able to douse the rates or the optimal healing representations from Source that you can apply to whoever you're working on. So instead of a witness, it's a target. And that's just a random number to represent it. So again, you're allowing Source all it needs to supply you with what you need for that person to be brought back up to an optimal state to function in this 3D world and allow them to accomplish what they need to accomplish and the reason they came here. And that's basically what it is. So you're letting Source do all the work, because really you're not going to know what that person needs exactly. So go ahead and practice this. Get some friends, ask them if you can do some remote healing on them. Don't even ask them what their symptoms are. Just allow yourself to represent that person then you're not going to be influenced by the symptoms or any of their problems. And just allow Source to provide you with the optimal frequency, or whatever it's called, energy, to bring that person up to that optimal state. So have a lot of fun with this. It's a really simple way of doing it. You don't have to have a superior background. You don't have to have any background in any healing methods. It's not something that's so difficult to do. You don't have to dose hundreds and hundreds of rates, or know hundreds and hundreds of rates, because you're going above that and you're allowing Source to actually do the work for you. So enjoy.